new to Elation, and I was really pleased to hear there's a neurodiversion EIG. Thanks, Daniel, for creating the group. It's really given me kind of a safe space to meet some like-minded individuals who also have a passion to educate others on being inclusive, and educate other people as well. So my neurodiverse journey started 6 years ago. My daughter was diagnosed with high-functioning autism. Initially, I struggled with her diagnosis as I couldn't think there would be absolutely anything wrong with her because she was just like me. She's got grit, she's got determination, she's literal, she's honest, and she always tries her best. But this is when I had the light bulb moment that I've got ASD too. So she's my mini me. She's going to be 12 next week. And through her diagnosis, we've been on this journey together. And it's definitely brought us closer. I'm really proud of the work that she's done raising awareness about neurodiversity. Abby was being bullied because of her disability. Instead of retaliating, I encouraged her to educate others on what neurodiversity is, the challenges she faced, and how neurotypical kids can best interact with ND kids, along with her positive attributes. So she created a 5-minute video, which she uploaded to YouTube. Using her video, she then gained a badge in Girl Guiding as part of her campaign badge. Girl Guiding UK got hold of it at HQ and used it as an inclusivity campaign right across the UK. Her school celebrated Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and the video was shown to all the children. Our local council got hold of the video and shared it with every single school in the borough. All this great work led for her to be in the local papers, radio, and even on the TV. Abby was nominated as a Pride of Reading Award, and she won the Inspirational Young Person Award. So last week I told her I'm going to be doing a talk about neurodiversity this week, and she said, "Well done, Mum. I'm really proud of you." But today isn't about me. Last week was Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and we're also celebrating March being Women's History Month. I was privileged to speak with Kate Wardle. Now, Kate's a mum of two. She lives in South Africa. During her own children's diagnosis, also like mine, she was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Kate's got her own business. She's a very successful businesswoman. She's a change agent for many large corporate organizations and helping them to be more neuro-inclusive. So if you do have any questions, feel free to come to me direct or reach out to the EIG. I hope you enjoy the chat. I think Daniel's going to press the play button for me, and it's been a right privilege to speak with you today. So thank you for joining. So good morning. Good morning. It's great to have you joining us this morning, Kate. For those that don't know me, so I'm relatively new to Relation. My name's Andrea Pollard. I'm one of the partner managers looking after partner alliances in EMEA. I haven't been within the business that long, so it was great for me to come on board and understand we've got a neurodiverse ERG. So I'm looking after very much working with the team to provide content. So an introduction was made to NIB and to Kate. So if I pass it over to you, perhaps you can give us a bit of an update on who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much. Yes, I'm Kate Wardle. I'm a volunteer at the Neurodiversity in Business charity. And the NIB charity is really about creating an industry forum where people and partners can come together to better accelerate change. So it was started just over 2 years ago by a man called Dan Harris in London because his child is a non-verbal autistic boy, and he wanted to really create a world where his son can be included in the workforce. And that message resonated strongly with a lot of different people around the world. And today we have over 600 global members, some of the biggest corporate names. And although we have a strong base in the UK, we are also increasingly getting members around the world. I head up the learning and development team, and I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa.
Fantastic. So the word neurodiversity, I think, is bounced around a lot nowadays. Do you just want to briefly explain what neurodiversity is?
Sure. I mean, I'd never heard the word myself 2, 3 years ago. And I found out about it in the same way a lot of adults do, which is through their children. Both my children were very different. We weren't really quite sure what was going on. One was extremely ahead in school, but anxious. One was really behind. And eventually we got to the assessment of autism. And why it was surprising to me was it wasn't how I had in my mind. It wasn't the picture I had in my mind, because all of us have, I guess, prejudices if we don't understand things. And I had in my mind a sort of small, non-verbal boy. And in fact, I've learned that autism can look different for many different people. And following that, I was assessed as autistic ADHD, which when they first said that to me, I did reject it out of hand because I didn't know enough. But on reflection, it's really helped me understand and better harness my own strengths. And so getting to the term of neurodiversity, it was a term that was first used about up to 30 years ago, but really has become quite well known in the last 10. And it simply refers to if you have a variety of different neurotypes, you obviously have neurodiversity. And of the global population, around 20% can be regarded as neurodivergent. So neurodivergence is an umbrella term really to cover the different neurotypes we're familiar with or get spoken about a lot. So autism, ADHD, but also things that you may not have known, like dyslexia, Tourette's, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, and a few others besides. And really the concept of sort of neurodivergence, neurodiversity it's almost an identity. It's a social identity rather than a medical diagnosis, because the conversation we're trying to have is to say, if it is simply the way our brains are and a biological result of evolution, then there's no need to sort of try to lump it into a problem that has to be treated. It's not a medical diagnosis that needs to be fixed. And what we're doing at the charity is really trying to reframe that to create awareness about different strengths. So neurodiversity as a concept in the workplace is something that has been gaining momentum. And some of you may well have already be familiar with this. I always take the time just to explain it in case you're not, because some people certainly aren't yet. And that's why we're doing some of these talks in relation to Neurodiversity Celebration Week, to think, how do we increase diversity of minds? Because increasing different types of thinking, different types of people, different types of backgrounds, better representation of genders, all of these things make a company more inclusive. And, research indicates that the more included you feel, the better sense of belonging, the better the results for everyone, for the company's results, for your own personal happiness, for the sense of, belonging and inclusion in the workplace, leads to everyone having a better outcome.
Yeah, I agree. So Kate and I have previously had a chat, and it is quite phenomenal how our stories are actually very similar after our own child being diagnosed autistic. You kind of go through a process that you think, oh, that's not right. They're just like me. There's nothing wrong with them. Because back then, I don't think people were diagnosed as much. People didn't talk about it. I my daughter was diagnosed when she was 6, and I was in denial. I felt like I was grieving. You go through like a massive process that your child isn't normal.
Mm.
And now I think she's coming up for 12 now, so we've really embraced the difference. And my partner, his children are dyslexic. One's got autism and ADHD as well. So we're very familiar, certainly at home, with noisy things or certain textures of clothing and background noise, for example, which you can't concentrate on. So that's what I said, we've massively embraced it, but I don't think the place of work is that accommodating, or it is getting better. What's been your experience in the workplace?
So I think for me, it's been really interesting and quite affirming to meet other people like myself, because I love that point, you thought that's just how it was. I mean, I thought that's just how it was. Small examples, like I can't keep my house tidy. I thought that's just how it was. Maybe I wasn't making enough of an effort. But in retrospect, to understand how my brain works better, I can't organize, like I can't group things logically.
Yeah,
So
right.
if I'm not interested.
I'm
If I'm
completely.
not interested in it, like I can step over things on the floor for 2 weeks, doesn't bother me. And it drives people mad. And you can think in an office environment that can be really hard if your desk is piled up with stuff you're not working on. I don't see it. My brain literally doesn't register it. So within the workplace, I've been meeting with companies now for the past 18 months, and it's phenomenal the work that's been going on. Okay, the UK is leading the charge a bit, but and that's actually great for me because I'm sitting in South Africa, and it's great to see this momentum, and for myself and for my children, I'm happy about that. But it's by no means any company has it sorted. Everyone's on a journey, and I'm finding that people are choosing to focus on different areas. So no one has got the whole holistic, perfectly right, and nor would we expect them to, I suppose. But we're seeing things like focus on recruitment. So it can be as simple as, is your recruitment practice inclusive? So have you really thought through, not just for neurodivergent people, but for everyone, does this process make sense? Or are we just relying on a process that has always existed? Like, does it make sense for the here and now in terms of how we ingest information and post-COVID and all of that? And does it make sense for the next generation? And does it make sense for neurodivergence? So there's obviously a lot of different lenses. And I think that's actually quite important before I ADHD forget this, that neurodivergence and neurodiversity awareness is not about saying, oh, we're another special group. We just want to have special treatment. I think there's sometimes that anxiety from people in the workplace going, oh, what now? It's not about that. It's if you can really think through inclusive touch points and how to make it easier for people who do find sensory input difficult or do suffer from anxiety or can't think fast on their feet, or whatever it is, you actually pick up a whole range of people because you don't have to be neurodivergent to be very nervous before interviews. So you're actually helping everyone perform to their best abilities. So back to the recruitment side. So some companies are thinking, what's our process? They're sending out questions in advance. They're letting you come into the office in advance if you're anxious. Like, come in the day before, have a walk around. It doesn't make any difference to them. It's so obvious. A lot of this stuff is simple. It doesn't cost. And then some companies like Wells Fargo, SAP, and a few others are investing in bespoke neurodivergent recruitment processes, particularly where they need tech skills. And
That's one thing that I was going to mention, actually, that
yeah,
in data, working in IT, apparently 2 in 5 people are neurodiverse. So I
exactly.
think it's something to do with the brain following patterns, processes. It's very always quite calculated that.
Yes, so neurodivergent strengths are often around attention to detail. So when we say, oh, ADHD people, we're all over the place, absolutely true. However, if I am interested in something or working on a project that I'm interested in, should I say, I'm obsessive about every last detail to the point of I'll work through the night, like if that's what has to happen. And if you can harness that in a healthy way, you can get a lot more out of people. And a lot of like autistic people, and I'm not talking for everyone, and I'm talking about general traits, are really great at tech. Because partly it's because our brains are very literal. So everything is one thing or the other. It's not like, could I reinterpret this in another? It's literal. We like being straight talking, a bit blunt, a bit rude sometimes, or we perceive to be rude, even if we don't mean it. And that skill and ability to see patterns and ability to see space in a different way is a hugely sought after skill in tech.
Yeah.
So that is why some companies are focusing on specific recruitment to try to get these skills in. But of course, it's not just about recruitment; it's about retaining the employees you already have. Statistically, up to 30% of people in tech may well be neurodivergent. And how do you make sure that you reduce the churn? Because that costs everyone. It costs the company, it costs the individual. We did some research last year which indicated that up to 42% of the people surveyed said that they would likely leave an organization if there were no accommodations. But if there were reasonable accommodations, it would drop to like 18%. And I think it's what are reasonable accommodations? It's not just about You know, can I work flexibly, or can I have noise cancelling headphones? Or it's around like the psychological safety, you know, can we have these conversations in your organization? Is it okay for me to say to not really talk to people when I get in and not be perceived as rude and not a team player? Like how do we get the balance there, to make sure everyone feels comfortable, not just the neurodivergent person, right? So I think that's a very interesting point for HR teams, people, executive teams to start thinking about. What does retention look like in today's world? You know,
One,
particularly for
one,
tech skills.
yeah, one thing I was gonna just go back to is, and this is very common in girls, is masking. And I remember like my first real kind of sales office job, I would be sat in a meeting room and I'd just be watching other women to see what they do, how they respond, how they're sat. And I'm basically masking what they're doing and masking some of the struggles that I had, and basically copying their behaviors because I didn't know how to act in business.
Yes.
And I think for me now, it has come very naturally, but you do have to take that time back just to reflect sometimes what's happening with the conversation, and are you doing the right thing? Are you sat the right way? Are you becoming across brash and rude, or if you're excited and passionate about a subject, that you're coming across quite aggressive?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you almost have to take a step back, going, oh, actually, I need to calm down here. And it's almost like, not like voices in your head crazy, but you kind of have a little chat with yourself about how you're performing a meeting or a call.
I think that's exactly it, and I think this is a hallmark of late assessed women. I'm obviously one of them, and I've done a lot of reading, and I've done a lot of you know, some of the people I've met through this journey. You know, the common sort of things that come out of it is, in general, in society, women are far more likely to mask. In other words, by masking, we mean adopt a behavior to kind of draw less attention to yourself, to keep the peace, as it were. And you know, I realized with myself, certainly I tended to say I could do things, whether I could or I couldn't. I'd like panic, say, yeah, I totally got that. And they'd say, you know, are you going to deliver this? No problem, no problem. Even if I had no idea what I was talking about, because it was like this absolute panic. I didn't ever think I had the option to say, I don't understand that. Or, you know, silly things. I always remember, you know, I used to work in London, and I'd want to go home for Christmas every year, you know, and I'd get so stressed about asking for leave that was entitled to me, that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't go and say, hi, would you mind if I took off? So I used to wait, if you can believe it, until like the last minute, like the day before, and then just go, I'm flying tomorrow for 2 weeks. Okay, bye. And I look back and I go, all of that is very autistic. Like, it's this fear of conflict, even if it's not conflict. And so you pretend all the time that you're okay. And some people go to the extreme, and I mean, this is me as well, where if you meet me, I'll always be the life and soul of the party. I'll be talking too much. I'll be the biggest story. I'll be the craziest person, you know. I'll be doing the craziest things. And I realized somewhere through my sort of late 20s, like, I'm kind of providing the entertainment, right? Like, why am I doing this? I'm playing a role in the room. Um, and it's been quite hard for me to actually go, you know what? Realizing with this knowledge and thinking through situations, because it's not even obvious, you're masking to yourself. I actually don't like dinner parties with people I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
like it. I
yeah,
used to have a job doing this. I was a
yeah.
charity fundraiser. And it makes me stressed, and I get worried about what I'm wearing and will I fit in, and I end up drinking or whatever, because you know, you're like, oh, how do I get?
Yeah.
And then once you've done a big event, I'm absolutely useless for days afterwards. And I never understood that payoff. But
If you,
now I do. It's much better, you know?
yeah, even if you have like a really busy day or you're in London all day and then you get back. And I mean, yesterday was a fun example. I was in London, I was traveling back. I had to stop and grab something for dinner. I walked in,
Yeah.
the daughter's like, Mum, shouting at me. My partner wanted to come down and talk to me. And I just said, I need some quiet time. And they're like, oh, okay, because they understand it. But that would
Yes.
sound really rude if you didn't know me and someone else in the house went, I need my quiet time, you know, because you just need to download, compress it, you know, just have 10 minutes playing a game or just not thinking, you know, just to relax a bit. And then you're
Recalibrate.
like, right, okay, I'm ready to go now. I'm ready to have a conversation with you. But we do that quite often, and it's okay in our house.
Yeah.
It
Well,
must be.
now we understand it as well. We do it. And I think this is like for someone like myself, I find it incredibly hard to have a full-time job because my energy is not an 8 hour, you know, it's not always predictable, but usually if I've had a number of meetings or met with a few different people, or particularly on a few different topics, because I'm terrible at taking on, you know, I'm working on a whole range of different topics at any one time because I can only concentrate for. And then by the afternoon, I'm exhausted. Like I literally can't talk. Now, if you're in a workplace, you just sit there and wait for the day to end, you know, you're wasting time. Whereas if I'm at home, if I'm working from home, then I might have a 20-minute power nap. I'll reset the brain, then I'm finding it,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. So what do you think businesses can do to be perhaps more accommodating? I mean, I know we spoke about going to events, and to me, especially in our industry, I think it'd be a fantastic idea if there was like a neurodiverse chill out zone where it's just a quiet room that people can go. I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do, but I've been at events and you do have people come up and talk to you constantly. And, you know, at that point, my head feels like it's going to explode and I will just take myself off to the bathroom. But I just think it would be a really nice idea to have something like that included when we do events.
Well, I think we've really been pushed this year. We're organizing our annual conference in April in London. And it's been a fascinating thing because I've worked in events for years, right? And I like organizing events. I get obsessive. As I said, then I ran out of energy at some point. But we really had to think that through. So what does an inclusive event look like? How do you create an opportunity for everyone to input? Because some people want to talk and draw and walk around the room and talk loudly, me, and some people will find it hard to be heard. So we've had to like create different workshops where some, you know, are much more interactive and some are panel discussions where you can ask questions, but you can ask them online or verbally if you don't want to ask verbally. You know, so it's thinking through all these different points, and we have created a chill out, an ND zone. We have also thought through, I actually got this tip from one of our charity partners around Ambitious About Autism, they're called, around different color lanyards. So in a big event, you can have a red lanyard, which is like, I don't do small talk, like, please, I really don't want to chit chat. And then yellow is like, yeah, I do, but I find it a bit awkward to start. And then green is like, sure, chat to me about anything. And it was so interesting because I was at a conference last year with this color scheme, and it took discipline not to speak to people wearing a red lanyard because you feel you ought to say, hi, how's it going? You know, like you don't need to do that. So it's been it's interesting for companies because I think we certainly passed the phase of you have to go to the pub to get ahead. I mean, that's sort of done. And we are thinking about more inclusive events or more opportunities for people to socialize. But team building events are still very, very stressful for a lot of autistic people because there's so many unknowns. And I think when I talk to people, that's a lot of where the stress comes from. Like you don't know what's coming. So you don't know how long you're expected to stay there or what's going to happen next, or if someone's going to suddenly spring something on you. And that lack of knowledge causes the anxiety. So it's like if you can explain it all in advance to someone and give them the option, they'll be happier, like they'll come
Yeah,
if
yeah.
they want to. But I mean, but it's like sometimes, you know, with the best will in the world, an events team or a marketing team will say, oh, we've got a wonderful surprise, right? We're going to take you all away and it's going to be amazing. And all we're going to say is, please don't wear jeans. You know, that's like an absolute nightmare to me.
That made my stomach turn when you said that. I hate
Exactly.
surprises. I hate surprises. I just,
Hate it.
yeah.
Hate it. So I think it's thinking through those touch points and even like So my son, who's autistic ADHD, he had a friend around the other day, and it was interesting with this knowledge. And the two of them, and they both at a special education needs school, they sat next to each other and they were interacting, but one was watching YouTube and one was playing on his iPad. Yet they were still interacting, and it's what it's often called with children like parallel play, parallel play. So like most children grow out of it by about 3 to 4 years old, but a lot of autistic children still prefer to do what they're doing as it's next to someone else. It's like a separate activity, but next to someone. And what was interesting about that was I realized a few years ago, I would have yelled like, switch off those devices and get outside, you know? And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but there's certainly I think you become a lot more patient and aware that you can interact in different ways. It may not look like playing to you or what you think of as playing. But even if I had to take them outside, I would have to facilitate some of the play. Whereas in the past, I just get upset that they couldn't kick a ball to each other. So I think the awareness is absolutely key. And I think that's really where most companies are starting and should start. It's having conversations like this.
Yeah, great. And what about the kind of office environment? What good businesses do when people are office based? Is there any advice you've got there?
So it's interesting. There's 3 different sort of aspects to look at. And the one is, the actual processes. So a lot of the processes, like most organizations, it's like when you get a PowerPoint template or you get a PowerPoint, something for your client, and you just keep updating the PowerPoint, right? And you fiddle around with it and you cut and paste and you hope to God you haven't left some old info in there. And the same with a lot of procedures and processes. Most companies don't have the luxury of time to sit back and go, let's review all of this holistically. So it doesn't happen. It's not through, ill will. It just doesn't happen. So the first thing is to actually look through, are our processes too rigid or too generalized? Because most of it's designed for the 80%. Like, how can we simplify this? How can we streamline this so that we're leading the conversation? Because what you don't want is employees to have to continually motivate for concessions. And the reason you don't want that is it wastes time. Wastes the employee's time. They might be unproductive for days getting the doctor's notes together and stressing about it and trying to work up the courage. And then you're going to waste more time with, it all going up the chain. So what can you do to look at it and go, is that actually inclusive or not? And some of it is a massive challenge for HR because after COVID, a lot of those processes are being reviewed anyway. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is around training and awareness. So we see a lot of, like you were talking about your ERG. That's a fantastic way for companies to start. And the reason I always say that to companies is, you can imagine in a smaller company where you don't have so many people, you think, do we need a formal ERG? And I say, you don't have to have a huge complicated thing. What you do need is to find out what the employees need. You don't want to make an assumption. So I think an ERG is a fantastic way for people to, get a sense of what's required in the business, what will make a difference. And then you need leadership. So you need someone senior who's prepared to stand up and say, this is me, or this is my kid, or this is my family member, or whatever it is. I believe in this. But then often you get a gap, like with anything in any company. You can have the leadership, promoting it. And then you can have sort of internal comms and HR trying to filter it in, which is usually my job in my day job. And then, you have a gap because people are too busy or whatever it is. So I think you do need training sessions and awareness sessions for managers, for middle management. And that is really to give them the tools.
Yeah.
Because people are anxious about saying the wrong thing or they don't know what to do. And it works both ways. So I think that is really helpful. And then the final part is the design. So there's the physical design of the workspace. And a lot of companies are investing in upgrading or redesigning their offices after COVID for various reasons. But the actual new designs coming in are focused on neuro-inclusion. And it's around, inclusion, should I say, really. But it's around creating what they call neighborhoods. So you're not stuck on a desk, like to try and get away from that culture of if you're not at your desk and I can't see you, you're not working. Oh, I hope that's not too noisy. Sorry. And then so they're trying to make it so that you can move around from quiet areas of the office to noisy areas of the office so that you can move during the day depending on your sensory needs.
Yeah.
And then technology as well.
Yeah, but with the hot desking thing, it's like if I'm sat at a different desk or if I've got my back to the door, I can't concentrate. I need to be facing the door. And if I get to the office and someone else is sat there and I don't have that, completely throws me for the day, which sounds ridiculous, but I really have to try harder to concentrate.
I don't think it's ridiculous. I think it's evidence-based. Everyone has got a very set sensory preference, and you'll find that whether you walk into a restaurant, into someone's house, into your office, you will always sit pretty much in the same seat.
Yeah.
And once people have become used to a space, you know, if you have a meeting, everyone will come in and sit down, right? And they will not shift their position again that day, you know, in a meeting room. They won't walk around and swap seats. So
No.
once something becomes established, it's also hard to move.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, that's just something to be aware of, because if you are really battling with your back, I don't mind my back to the door. I actually find it harder if I'm looking at people. I'd rather have less distraction in front of me. But you know, there's a lot of new workplace design, like they're making acoustic paneling nests, you know, so people can go and sit if they're feeling overwhelmed and work somewhere else. And it's more around creating this community environment rather than saying, this is my desk, these are my photos on my desk, no one touch my chair, you know, which is how I certainly used to work. So it's a new way of working. And I think that's what's really interesting is how different generations are going to embrace that, because the younger generation, that's fine, that makes intrinsic sense. But it's more like the Gen Xers and older who are like, that doesn't seem right.
No. So there's two friends that we quite often go out for lunch, and they would always say to me, "Where would you like to sit?" And the first time they did that, I was like, "Wow, you actually know that I have chair issues." You know, it just seems crazy. But nothing
I've got friends like that.
yeah.
So that's great.
I kind of wanted to pick up on was the second point you had. Now I've just had a mind blank moment.
Leadership, ERGs.
Yeah, the ERGs and kind of what's the best way for um neurodiverse people? Are there any kind of software or anything if you're dyslexic that perhaps businesses could invest in?
Yeah, so it's interesting how design is becoming critical to two different pieces of tech, and I'm sure in your industry this is, you know, in general, this is obviously a hot topic, how quickly technology is evolving. So what we're seeing in this space is a lot of companies are investing in things like Text Help, which is, I'm just giving an example, but it's a company that does dyslexia software, but it's just a Chrome plugin. So you don't have to, you know, you buy it as an enterprise-wide license, and it actually helps anyone who may be too tired to read. You know, it'll read text to talk. It'll also block out colors in the words, so it'll help you read faster if you are dyslexic. But it can obviously help a lot of different people depending on how you read or what your first language is. So that's smart, you know, and that's less about you going through the wellness, I've got a problem, I'm so sorry, would you mind if you buy me a license kind of route. And then the next thing is there's another company we work with who's one of our partners, and they're doing something called the Access Passport. And they're actually letting anyone trial it as part of our conference. But you can always, anyone can go and take a look at it. It's very smart. You put everything down into a record like once. So you're not continually having to explain it to people. And then you own the record and you give people access when it suits you. And you can see who's logged in. So it's not being forwarded as a PDF as part of your CV. Okay. It's a secure record for you. And in an ideal world, you'll end up having it like follow you around through life, right? And it doesn't have to just be neurodivergence. It could be anything. It could be any kind of challenge at home or stage of your life or whatever it is. So that's clever. And then, of course, AI. A lot of people in this space are looking at AI because it's got so much potential to help. And so I'm saying to a lot of companies like well, I'm sure, everyone is saying to companies about, you can't risk losing sight, you can't not engage. But there's a lot of fear and, outright banning of, say, ChatGPT. But where I find it helps me as an ADHD person is like my background is, I mean, I have a degree in English literature. I write content, I can write no problem. What I do have a problem with is focus. Um, and procrastination. And so sometimes it is really beneficial if I can use ChatGPT to structure something for me and then I can rewrite it.
Yeah.
So that speeds things up for me. It could take me an entire day standing up and walking around my desk to put together a slide deck, or I could just go, could you make some suggestions for whatever?
Yeah.
So that's, that type of thing, we need to look at the positives for how it
Absolutely.
will help us.
So another quick topic, because I'm just conscious of time, is when I left my old company, I was there for 9 years, and I kind of went through the journey of my daughter being diagnosed and then the realization I'm also autistic. So they kind of came with me on the journey. And one of my directors asked me, we were discussing, do you come out as neurodivergent during your interview? I did.
Yeah.
I didn't, and this is probably quite a bold move because I've only been here 6 weeks now for me to actually be doing this talk because a lot of people won't actually know. And I said, one of the directors said to me, "Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't mention it if I was you." And I kind of thought, do you know what? Why? Why not?
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of resilience. I have focus, and I like not proving people wrong. It comes across um, not like that, but I like to achieve that sense of achievement and reward and recognition on the back end of it. So I think it helps me massively focus to get
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
and have the drive. So what's your advice to perhaps similar ladies in a similar position to us? Should they talk about it to the business?
So I think it is such a tricky thing because I think as a woman, you definitely don't, first of all, you don't appear, you almost get stuck in like a double jeopardy kind of situation. If you do say you're autistic, then you might get dismissed with, I'm not talking in an interview, but in general with, isn't everyone a bit autistic these days?
Drives
Which is
me
so
nuts.
irritating.
Drives me
Um,
nuts.
so, yeah. Or if you don't say anything, then you actually start a job feeling like a bit of a fraud. And I think what's actually part of this is autistic traits is like a lot of us, I'm talking about myself, are really poor at playing games. We're very literal people. We don't like lies. We feel very uncomfortable. We're not good at like sort of talking nonsense to get ahead. Like that never crosses my mind. And it's probably, one of the first things a psychiatrist said to me when we were talking about my kids, and I was talking loudly, and he said, I don't even need to assess you, but I will. He said, you talk very loudly, and he said, I bet you're very poor at negotiating salary and the like. And I was like, yep, because I don't like conflict. So I think autistic people feel very uncomfortable if there's any kind of sense of unfairness or disingenuous behavior. So that is why it's almost impossible not to say in an interview, right? Because you feel like you're being a fraud. However, a lot of people aren't happy to disclose. It depends where you are in the world.
Yeah.
I did a presentation here yesterday to a company where the guy had actually invited me in, and then he said, please don't say anything about me on this call. So it's interesting. There's a lot of fear, and that stigma of being judged or being judged as less is real. So I think my view on it is, depending on where you are in the journey, are you prepared to advocate for yourself?
Yeah.
Because if you're prepared to say, I am autistic, I'm happy to answer any questions at all, I will let you know how you can help me, and I will, also tell you how I'm going to help you. Like if you are that confident and you at that point in your journey, great. If you've been assessed the month before and you're finding it very upsetting and hard to reconcile and you're not sure, then wait to speak to people. Only speak to people you know will support you no matter what. And that goes for friends and family too, you know. I didn't speak to a lot of friends up front, but my close friends, like you just mentioned, your friends, you know, they support me, and sometimes they might tease me a bit, but you know, we'll go into a restaurant, they'll go, "Is the music all right for you?" You know, and you know, and that's not them making fun of me. They genuinely saying, yeah, they don't mind if I go and ask them to turn the music down, and some people would be mortified.
Yeah.
So I think that my advice, or not my advice, but my feeling is you need to assess the organization's values, and you can assess that without disclosing your diagnosis. So if you don't have a good feeling in general, then it's probably not going to work, right?
No.
Um, and I
Okay.
think it's also important to do your homework. Like I wish I'd thought when I was younger, I'd go to a lot of interviews. I'm really good at acing interviews. I put myself down in interviews, so I don't really demonstrate what I know, but I try to be all like, like, and then the problem with that is if someone says, "What can you do?" You say, "Yeah, I can do that, sure." And you never think to ask the other way around. You know, you don't advocate hard enough to go. So if, for example, I'm having a bad morning and I need to start work at 10, what happens then? Right? You don't actually get a sense of what happens in the real world. And I think that should determine when, if you could disclose, how comfortable you are asking these questions.
Yeah, no, it's been fascinating to speak to you, and I could speak to you for hours, but I'm sure
I
we'll get
know. I'd
some other.
love to speak to you for hours. Well, all I would say is for anyone listening who is neurodivergent or who suspects they may be neurodivergent, whatever it is, I think talking has just been the most empowering thing. So I'd really encourage you to get involved with your ERG. Often people say, should I get diagnosed? Well, you know, first and foremost, just read as much as you can, talk to people who are friends and allies, and you know, just become comfortable in yourself, because it's taken me 3 years to go, this is just how it is, you know,
Yeah,
this is just my brain, there's pros, there's cons, like anything in life.
yeah.
um
And
yeah
if anyone's got any girls on the spectrum as well, there is a fascinating book that inspired my daughter called The Spectrum Girls Survival Guide.
yes.
It's written by a lady called Sienna Miller, who started Neurodiversity Celebration Week. Huge advocate of her. It just kind of empowers you and makes you kind of understand how, especially if you've got tweens, teens, and yeah, brilliant,
I
brilliant.
actually I read a book ages ago called Drama Queen. I think it's by Sarah Gibbs, and it was such an eye-opener because it was all around the poor labels you get labeled with, like, oh, you're such a drama queen, you're so fussy, you're so this, you're so that. And like it was just such an eye-opener to go, oh, yes, all of those labels, you're so bossy, you're so
That's me.
rude. That's me. And so that was hugely empowering. And then there's some fantastic websites and work being done. Samantha Hugh, ADHD Girls, Leanne Maskell's written a recent book. So I think for women on the spectrum, just know that, or neurodivergent women, it doesn't look the same. That doesn't mean that it's not a real, things can be really difficult for you. You know, it's not making an excuse. And I think as women, we tend to give ourselves the hardest time,
Yeah.
you know, to accept help and ask for help. It's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant, brilliant. I really appreciate your time. When you're over in London, give us a shout. I'd love to meet up with you. Carry on chatting
Definitely.
over a glass of wine next time.
Brilliant. Don't have to ask me twice. All right. Well, thanks so much for all your time today. And do, if you're interested, follow us, Neurodiversity in Business, on LinkedIn to catch up with what we're doing. We've got, you know, we do research. We ask for people to join, you know, fill out surveys, and yeah, it'd be great. So thanks so much for your support.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.